Not every driver who sees something on Haivan Pass lives long enough to tell the story. Some say they saw a woman standing on the shoulder of the road, her hair soaked, a white raincoat clinging to her body, one hand wrapped around a cloth bag, the other raised for a ride. Some say that the moment they let her into the truck, the cab turned as cold as a walk-in freezer. Some say she barely spoke at all. She only sat there, staring out toward the sea. But the part that terrifies drivers the most is not the moment she appears. It is the moment just after the truck clears a bend, when they glance at the passenger seat and realize it is empty. All that remains is a cold puddle of water, a faint smell of incense, and a voice behind their neck whispering, "Do not keep driving. Someone ahead is waiting to die." Haivan Pass lies between Tuetianhui and Da Nang. On one side, the mountains rise high and dark. On the other, the sea opens into a deep blue distance. By day, the place is breathtaking. The road curves around the mountainside, white clouds drift across the asphalt, and far below, the ocean stretches like a massive sheet of glass. People have long called it Tianha de Nat Hung Quan, the most majestic pass under the southern sky. But at night, especially on nights of rain and fog, that beauty changes into something else. Before the Haivan Tunnel came into common use, the pass was feared by countless long-haul drivers. Its sharp curves, steep grades, thick fog, heavy trucks, buses, and motorbikes made the road one of the most dangerous routes in central Vietnam. Many accidents happened there. Vehicles lost control and slammed into the mountain wall. Trucks overturned in the middle of blind turns. Some people drove across the pass once and never came home. That was when the stories began. Long-haul truckers said that on rainy nights, they sometimes met a woman standing by the road, asking for a ride. She never asked to go far, only across one stretch of the pass. Some drivers stopped out of pity, but after a short while, when they looked over, she was gone. Some believed she was the spirit of a traffic accident victim. Others said she was not there to hurt anyone. She was only looking for a truck that would take her back to the place where she died.
That night, Lam accepted a late delivery. He was 42 years old and had been driving trucks for almost 20 years. He was lean, sunburned, and always had the dark rings under his eyes that come from years of poor sleep. Lam was not the kind of man who believed in ghosts. To him, bad roads were dangerous. A faulty brake system could kill you. A sleepy driver could kill himself. Ghosts were just stories people told at roadside diners to make the night pass faster. His load that night was a shipment of refrigeration parts from Da Nang to Hue. Normally, Lam would have taken the Haivan Tunnel. It was faster, safer, and easier on the engine. But that evening, the warehouse called with a last-minute dispatch problem. He had to swing by an old pickup point near the Da Nang side of the pass and collect a few extra crates. Mr. Sao, the warehouse owner, told him, "Go up the old pass for a bit and loop down. It is faster than turning all the way around."
Lam Frau Wen.
"Why would I go up the pass at this hour, Uncle Sao? In this rain?" Mr. Sao stood under the corrugated metal awning with a cigarette burning down between his fingers. Rain hammered against the roof. A cold wind blew down from the mountain. "Take it or leave it. The customer is pushing hard. Besides, you have driven this road your whole life. What are you afraid of?" Lam gave a dry laugh. "Only idiots in small cars who think they are racers." Mr. Sao did not laugh with him.
Lam.
"Yeah. If you go up the pass and see someone asking for a ride, do not stop." Lam froze with one hand on the cargo door. "Why are you saying that all of a sudden?" Mr. Sao crushed the cigarette under his shoe on the wet concrete. Listen to an old man, especially near High Van Gate. Heavy rain, thick fog, someone standing on the roadside. Just keep driving.
Làm chút cờ.
You believe those stories too? Mr. Sao did not smile. It is not about believing. It is about the people who did not believe and died anyway. Those words stayed with Lam during the first stretch of the drive. Not because he was scared, because Mr. Sao's voice had been strange when he said them. Not like a man telling a spooky story. More like a man remembering something he had seen with his own eyes. Lam steered onto the pass close to midnight. The rain was not heavy, but it was steady, the kind of misty central Vietnam rain that looks harmless and still chills you to the bone. The wipers swept back and forth across the windshield, smearing the beams of the headlights into crooked streaks. Ahead, the road bent and vanished into a wall of white fog. Inside the cab, there was only the heavy growl of the engine, the wet hiss of tires on asphalt, and the faint static from the radio. Lam reached over and turned the dial, but every station broke apart in interference. A woman's voice came through for a moment, very soft and broken. If you go to Hugh, then go. Then the song dissolved into static. Lam switched the radio off. Singing at this hour, perfect. He spoke to himself the way long-haul drivers do when they are trying to stay awake. High Van Pass at night did not look like any road Lam had ever driven. He had crossed it many times in daylight. Standing near the top, the sea looked painted onto the world. Tourists stopped for photographs, laughed, bought coffee, ate rice dumplings, and posed beneath the old gate of Hai Van Quan. But after dark, all of that disappeared.
No tourists. No laughter.
No blue ocean. Only black mountain, deep drop-offs, white fog, and bends in the road that felt as if they were waiting to swallow the truck whole. Lam switched on his high beams. The light swept across the trees along the shoulder. A warning sign appeared, then vanished behind him. Dangerous mountain road, slow down. Lam eased off the accelerator. The truck crawled through a hairpin turn. At that exact moment, his phone buzzed. It was his wife, Thursday. Lam put her on speaker.
I'm listening.
Her voice was heavy with sleep. Where are you? Just got onto the pass. Why are you on the pass? You said you were taking the tunnel. I had to pick up extra freight. The line went quiet for a few seconds.
Lam.
What? I just dreamed about your mother. His hands tightened slightly on the wheel. My mother died a long time ago. I know, but in the dream, she was standing in the yard, completely soaked. She asked if you had come home yet. Lam felt irritation rise in him, mostly because he did not want to feel fear. It is late. Do not tell me strange things right now. Go back to sleep. Please drive carefully. I will. He ended the call. Inside the cab, the sound of the rain suddenly seemed louder. Lam's mother had died when he was very young. In truth, he barely remembered her face. There were not many photographs in the house. His father, Min, always looked away when her name came up. When Lam was a child, his father told him she had left because she could not stand being poor. Later, when Lam grew older, he stopped asking. Some stories, if the living refuse to tell them, cannot be explained by the dead. His father had died 3 months earlier. Before he passed, he left Lam an old metal box tied shut with wire. Inside were yellowed vehicle papers, a photograph with one burned corner, and a scrap of paper with a shaky line written across it. "Do not go up high, van, on a rainy night." Lamb had thought his father was old and confused. But now, for reasons he could not explain, those words kept appearing in his mind. "Do not go up high, van, on a rainy night." Around 12:30, the fog thickened. The truck was moving at barely more than 20 kilometers an hour. The wet road shone like black glass. The white lane markings slid under the tires like bones underwater. Lamb cracked the window to keep himself awake. Cold air rushed in, carrying the smell of wet earth, pine leaves, and salt from the sea. He was about to roll the window back up when he saw someone standing ahead. On the right shoulder, Lamb tapped the brake. A woman stood under the trees, maybe 10 meters from the front of the truck. She wore a white raincoat. Long hair hung across her shoulders. One arm held a dark cloth bag. The other was raised, asking for a ride. Her face was hidden beneath the hood. Lamb cursed under his breath. "Who stands out here at this hour?" Then he remembered Mr. Sow's warning. If you see someone asking for a ride, do not stop. The truck crawled past her. Lamb forced himself to look straight ahead. He did not stop. As the cab came level with her, the woman turned her head and followed him with her gaze. For one short instant, the headlights reflected across her face. Lamb saw pale skin and blue lips. He swallowed hard and pressed the accelerator. The truck passed her. But less than 20 meters later, something struck the back of the truck. Lamb glanced into the side mirror. There was nothing but fog. This time it was clearer, as if someone had wrapped their knuckles against the cargo door.
Lam Frau Wen.
What now? He slowed down. The knocking continued. Not fast, not slow. 3 knocks at a time. Lamb thought a tie-down strap might have come loose, or maybe a branch had snagged against the box. If something was hanging off the truck, it could be dangerous on the descent. He pulled onto the shoulder, set the parking brake, grabbed his flashlight. Before opening the door, he looked at the passenger seat. Empty. He laughed at himself. "Get it together, Lamb." He stepped down from the cab. Outside, the wind felt much colder than it had through the window. The misty rain hit his face like pinpricks. Lamb shone the flashlight around the cargo box. Nothing. The straps were tight. The doors were locked. The rear tires looked fine. He walked around to the back. The beam swept across the wet asphalt. Then he saw footprints.
Bare footprints.
Small.
Vet.
Pressed into the thin strip of mud near the shoulder. Lamb stood completely still. The footprints began at the roadside, came right up to the passenger door, and then disappeared. He spun around. Behind the fogged passenger window, someone was sitting in the cab. Lamb went cold. The woman in the white raincoat was inside his truck. She faced forward, motionless, as if she had been sitting there for a long time. Lamb could not remember how he opened the door and climbed back in. He only remembered that when he got behind the wheel, the woman slowly turned toward him. Her face was not as terrifying as he had imagined. She looked a little over 30, pale from the cold. Her eyes were sunken and tired, but deeply sad. Water ran from her hair to her chin and fell, drop by drop, onto the cloth bag in her lap. Lamb opened his mouth. "When did you get in?" The woman looked at him. "Can you give me a ride for a short distance?" Her voice was hoarse and very soft. But Lamb heard every word. He wanted to throw her out. He wanted to ask why she had climbed into his truck. He wanted to shout, if only to cover his fear. But when he looked into those eyes, all he managed to say was, "Where are you going?" "Past the 7th bend." Lamb narrowed his eyes. "Which one is the 7th bend?" The woman turned to the road ahead, drowned in fog. "Just drive. I will tell you when we get there." Lamb gripped the wheel. His hands were cold. "What are you doing on the pass at this hour?" She said nothing. Lamb looked down at her feet. She wore no sandals. Her bare feet were white, wet, and streaked with mud. His throat went dry. "Were you in an accident?" The woman shook her head. "Not yet." Lamb turned sharply toward her. "What does that mean?" She looked back at him. "The accident has not happened yet." The cab fell silent. Only the rain tapped against the windshield. Lamb forced out a thin laugh. "You talk strangely." The woman did not answer. Before Lamb could say anything else, the radio switched on by itself. Static filled the cab. Then a man's voice broke through the noise. "Truck license plate. Brake failure. Move clear." Lamb jerked his eyes toward the radio. He had turned it off. He reached out and switched it off again. The radio went silent. 1 second later, it came back on. This time it carried the sound of a child crying. Very softly, as if the cry were rising from the bottom of the ravine. The woman in the passenger seat closed her eyes. "Do not listen." Fear made Lamb angry. "Who are you?" She opened her eyes. Someone who once waited for a truck to stop. Lamb kept driving. He did not know why he did not make the woman get out. Maybe the road was too empty. Maybe the night was too cold. Maybe some part of him needed to know what would happen next. The fog was so thick that the headlights reached only a few yards ahead of the hood. The woman sat in silence. Every so often, she wiped the glass on her side with her hand and looked out as if searching for something. Lamb tried to keep talking so he would not lose his nerve. "What is your name?" After a long pause, she said, "Han." The name made Lamb stiffen. His mother's name had been Han too.
Nguyen Thi Han.
But it was a common name. He told himself that. "Are you from Hugh?" "I was. And now I am on the road." Lamb stopped asking questions. A few minutes later, the woman said, "Lamb." The truck swerved slightly. Lamb snapped his head toward her. "How do you know my name?" She did not look at him. "It is embroidered on your shirt." Lamb looked down. His warehouse uniform did have LAM stitched on the chest. He let out a breath, trying to calm himself. Then she added, "Tran Phuc Lam." This time, there was no explanation that could calm him. No one at the warehouse used his full name. No one except on official documents. Lamb stepped on the brake. The truck shuddered to a stop in the middle of the road. "Who are you?" The woman remained calm. You should not stop here. Answer me." She turned and looked at him. Her eyes no longer looked only sad. They looked like they were begging. "Lamb, keep driving. A truck is coming behind you." As soon as she finished, a horn screamed from somewhere inside the fog. Lamb looked into the mirror. A huge light was charging toward them. Another truck. It was swaying down the road, headlights flashing, horn blaring without pause. Lamb cursed, hit the gas, and pulled tight against the mountain wall. The other truck tore past him on the left, missing him by inches. The blast of air shook the cab. In the split second when it passed, Lamb saw the driver's face. A middle-aged man, eyes wide, mouth open in a silent scream. But what froze Lamb's blood was the passenger seat of that other truck. A woman in a white raincoat was sitting there. No, not another woman. The same woman.
Han,
Same wet hair. Same cloth bag in her lap. Same pale face turning to look at Lamb. The truck vanished into the fog. Lamb turned sharply toward his own passenger seat. Han was still there, motionless. Lamb felt as if his heart might burst. What was that? What just happened? Han said quietly, "He did not stop when I asked for a ride." "So you got into his truck?"
no,
Then who was sitting beside him? Han stared ahead. The thing waiting for him at the bend. Lamb did not understand. He did not want to understand. Ahead, a terrible crash split the night. Metal slammed against stone. Glass shattered. Tires shrieked across wet asphalt. Then came a silence that felt dead. Lamb hit the brakes. Han grabbed his wrist. Her hand was cold as ice water. "Do not get out. There was an accident. Do not get out alone. Are you insane? He could be dying." Lamb tore his hand free, opened the door, and ran into the rain. The rain had grown heavier. With his flashlight in hand, he ran forward. After one narrow curve, he saw the truck that had passed him lying tilted on its side. Its front end smashed into the mountain wall. The windshield was shattered. White smoke rose from the hood. Lamb rushed to the driver's door. The driver was trapped behind the wheel, his face bloody, but he was breathing. "Can you hear me?" The man groaned. Brakes failed. Lamb tried to pull the door open, but it was jammed. He turned back and shouted, "Han, help me!" No one answered. Lamb looked toward his own truck. The cab lights were on. The passenger seat was empty. Han had vanished. Lamb swallowed hard. Then, from behind the wrecked truck, he heard a woman's whisper. "Do not pull him out through that door." Lamb turned. Han stood by the shoulder, right beside the edge of the drop-off. The rain no longer seemed to make her any wetter, as if she had been soaked down to the bones for a very long time. "The other door," she said. "Pull him from the other door. The fuel line is about to catch." Lamb had no time left to be afraid. He did exactly as she said. He ran to the passenger side, grabbed the crowbar from his toolkit, and forced the door open. It took almost 3 minutes before the metal gave. He pulled the driver out just as a small explosion popped under the front end. It was not loud like in the movies, but it was enough for fire to flare under the hood. The driver lay on the road, gasping. Lamb called emergency rescue. The signal broke in and out. Took a long time for the call to connect. While they waited, the injured driver suddenly grabbed Lamb's hand. "Where is she?"
Lam bent closer.
"Who?" The man shook violently. "The woman in my truck." Lamb said nothing. The driver began to cry. "I did not let her in. I swear I did not. I only drove past her. But when I reached the bend, I looked over, and she was sitting there. She told me to give it back." Lamb felt the cold climb up his spine. "Give what back?" The man stared past Lamb into the fog. "A child." Rescue arrived almost 40 minutes later. The injured driver was taken away. Lamb's truck had not been seriously damaged, only streaked with mud and a long scrape where it had been forced close to the mountain wall. When people asked if Lamb had been traveling with anyone, he almost said yes. Then he looked at the empty passenger seat and stopped himself. There was no trace of Han.
No raincoat. No class bag. No footprints.
Only a small puddle on the passenger seat, slowly soaking into the old upholstery. One of the rescue workers noticed it and laughed. "Your cab leaking?" Lamb did not answer. He sat inside the cab for a long time after everyone else left. The rain had eased. The fog was still thick. It was almost 2 in the morning. Lamb knew he was not calm enough to keep driving. He remembered a few small tea stalls near the top of the pass. By day they served tourists. At this hour they should have been closed, but at least he could find a place to stop. He drove farther up. Near Hiven Gate, he saw one little stall still glowing with light. A weak yellow lamp burned inside the fog. A faded tarp above the stall read, "Coffee green tea instant noodles." Lamb pulled over. An old woman, maybe 70, sat by a charcoal stove. Her back was bent and her silver hair was tied behind her head. When Lamb stepped inside, she did not look surprised. It was as if she had known he would come. "What will you drink?" "Hot tea, please." She poured the tea. Lamb sat on a plastic chair. His hands were still shaking. The old woman set the glass in front of him. "You met her, didn't you?" Lamb looked up. "Met who?" She stared out into the fog. "The woman who asks for a ride." Lamb said nothing. The old woman sighed. "On rainy nights, someone always sees her. Some keep driving. Some stop. Some never come down from the pass." Lamb tightened his grip around the hot glass. "You know her?" "Of course." "Who is she?" The old woman studied him for a long moment. "Why do you want to know?" "Because she knew my name." The old woman fell silent. The charcoal popped softly. Outside, wind hissed through the trees on the ridge. After a while, she stood and went into the back of the stall. She returned with an old notebook wrapped in plastic. Its edges were worn and soft. She placed it on the table. Before the tunnel, accidents happened here all the time. Ambulances, police, people from nearby houses. Everyone was used to running out to pull people from wrecks. I have sold tea here since I was young. Some of the dead had no one to claim them. Some lived, but lost their lives in other ways. Lamb opened the notebook. Inside were old newspaper clippings pasted to the pages, with notes written in blue ballpoint pen. Bus accidents, trucks losing brakes, motorbike collisions. people falling into the ravine. Some of the ink had blurred from moisture. The old woman turned to a page near the middle. Here. Lamb looked down. The clipping was old and yellow. The headline was almost unreadable, but a few lines remained clear. Accident on Highvan Pass during night rain. Woman dead. Young boy missing after collision with truck. Lamb's heart slammed in his chest. He read on. The female victim was about 24 years old. Her name was Nguyen Thi Han, from Thua Tien Hue. She had been traveling with a little boy around 4 years old. According to witnesses, the mother and child may have been trying to hitch a ride across the pass in the rain. After the collision, the woman died at the scene. The boy was not found. Lamb heard blood rushing in his ears. What year was this? The old woman answered, more than 30 years ago. Lamb shook his head. That is impossible. Why? My mother's name was Han too. The old woman looked at him. Her eyes changed. What is your name?
Lam.
Full name.
Lam Hestita. Chan Phúc Lam.
The old woman went very still. For a long time, neither of them spoke. Then she asked in a lower voice, was your father's name Min? Lamb felt a chill run through him. You knew my father? The old woman sat down across from him. Her wrinkled face looked pale under the yellow light. Back then, people suspected one truck was involved in the accident, but it disappeared before the police arrived. Later, some people said the driver was named Min. He ran freight between Da Nang and Hue. Lamb slammed his hand on the table. No. The old woman did not flinch. My father was not that kind of man. She said softly, no one knows what kind of person they are when they are afraid. Lamb shot to his feet. The plastic chair fell backward. Do not talk about my father like that. The old woman only looked at him with sadness, not anger. Then why did you come up the pass tonight? Lamb opened his mouth, but nothing came out. Because of work. Because of the delivery. Because of coincidence. But in his mind, he saw the old metal box his father had left him. The scrap of paper with the shaky warning. Do not go up High Van on a rainy night. The old woman slowly pushed the notebook toward him. Some dead people remain by the road, not to frighten anyone, only to wait until the last person finally comes back. Lamb put money for the tea on the table and walked outside. Before he got back into the truck, the old woman called after him. Lam. He turned. She said, if you meet her again, do not ask how she died. Then what should I ask? The old woman looked down the dark road below the pass. Ask what she lost. Lamb did not continue toward Hue. He turned into an empty pullout near Highvan Gate, shut off the engine, and sat alone in the cab. The rain began again. He took out his phone and tried to call his wife. No signal. He opened the glove compartment. Inside were vehicle papers, a rag, a bottle of medicated oil, and the old metal box his father had left behind. Lamb had brought it with him that afternoon because, after the delivery, he had planned to stop by the old family house in Hue and move a few of his father's things to the ancestral altar. The box sat there, silent, as if waiting to be opened. Lamb untwisted the wire. The lid lifted with a dry metallic scrape. He had looked through it once after the funeral, but only briefly. Now, under the cab light, Every object inside seemed frightening. Old registration papers, an expired driver's license, a photograph with one corner burned away. Lamb picked up the photograph. In it, a young woman stood near the sea, holding a little boy in her arms. Part of her face had burned away with the corner of the picture, but her smile was still gentle. On the back, someone had written, Han and Little Lamb Langko, 1994. Lamb stopped breathing. He turned the photograph over again and again. Little Lamb. Langko. Han. Everything inside his head began to break apart, but not enough to become clear. His father had said his mother left. He had said there were no photographs because the house burned. He had said she did not want to keep him. He had told Lamb to stop asking. Lamb searched deeper in the box. At the bottom was a mold-spotted envelope. On the outside, in his father's handwriting, were the words, "For Lamb, when you are brave enough." Lamb's hands shook so badly that he tore the edge of the envelope. Inside was a 3-page letter. Much of the ink had blurred. Lamb read,
Lam,
"If you are reading this, then I no longer have the strength to hide it. I am sorry. I am not your biological father." Lamb stopped. The world around him seemed to hollow out. The rain disappeared. The wind disappeared. Only the pounding of his heart remained. He kept reading. That night I was driving across Hivan Pass. The rain was heavy. I was hauling cold storage freight. The truck was overloaded and the brakes were weak. Near the bend below Hivan Gate, I saw a woman holding a child by the road. She asked for a ride. I did not stop. A little later, as I entered the bend, I lost control. The truck struck them. The woman fell. The child was thrown into the bushes near the shoulder. I was afraid. I was so afraid. I got out and saw that the woman was dead, but the child was still breathing. He was crying. He held onto my hand. I did not call anyone. I carried the child into my truck and drove away. I lied to everyone and said you were my son. I named you Tran Phuc Lam. I raised you with the rest of a coward's life. Your real mother was Nguyen Thi Han. The letter slipped from Lam's hand. He sat there without moving. Every memory of his father began to change shape. The man who had taught him to drive. The man who had beaten him once for speeding. The man who had stayed awake all night when Lam had a fever. The man who sat silently on the front porch whenever it rained. The man who had forbidden him from driving Hivan Pass. None of those memories were ordinary anymore. They had become a confession lasting more than 30 years. Lam covered his face. He wanted to cry, but he could not. He wanted to be angry, but did not know where to place the anger. His father had caused his mother's death. But that same man had raised him. His mother had not left. His mother had died by the road. And Lam had lived his whole life in the house of the man who took him from her arms. At that moment, the passenger seat beside him sank slightly. Lam slowly turned. Han was sitting there. White raincoat. Wet hair. Cloth bag in her lap. But this time, under the cab light, Lam could see her face clearly. It was the same face from the photograph. His mother's face. Lam opened his mouth. No sound came out. Han looked at him for a long time. Then she lifted her hand, as if she wanted to touch his cheek. Her fingers stopped in the air. You grew up. Only 3 words. Lam collapsed against the steering wheel. A sob tore out of him like an old wound being opened. Mom! Han closed her eyes. A drop of water slid down her cheek. Maybe rain. Maybe a tear. Lam did not know how long he cried. When he lifted his head, Han was still there. Outside, the fog was so thick he could not see more than a few yards. His voice came out raw. What do you want me to do? Han looked through the windshield. Drive past the 7th bend. Is that where you died? She did not answer. Lam started the truck. The engine turned over with a heavy growl. He no longer knew what he was doing, but if Han had told him to drive straight off the mountain, he was not sure he would have had the strength to refuse. The truck rolled forward. Han began to count. First bend. The truck cleared a wide curve. Second bend. A short downhill stretch. Third bend. Fog pressed white against the windshield. Fourth bend. The radio crackled again. Fifth bend. The cry of a child came through closer than before. Sixth bend. Lam's hands went numb on the wheel. When they reached the next bend, Han placed her hand on the steering wheel. Stop! Lam pressed the brake. The truck stopped before a very narrow curve. On the right was the drop-off, below it a black ravine. On the left, the wet mountain wall where weeds grew out between the rocks. There was nothing special about it. Only another curve among dozens on the pass. But Lam felt that this place was colder. So cold his breath showed in front of him. Han opened the door and stepped out. Lam followed. The rain had stopped, but fog drifted across the road like incense smoke. Han stood by the shoulder and pointed down near the edge. There. Lam shone his flashlight. At first, he saw only weeds and stone. Then he noticed something caught between 2 roots. An old cloth bag. Dark. Half-rotted. Exactly like the one Han had been carrying in her lap. Lam climbed carefully down the edge, grabbed onto a tree, and pulled the bag free. The fabric was torn, but inside was a layer of plastic that had been wrapped tightly. He opened it. Inside were a tiny pair of children's sandals, a faded yellow sweater, an old birth certificate, and a thin notebook. Lam shone the light on the paper. Child's name.
Nguyễn Phúc Lam.
Mother.
Nguyễn Thi Hân.
Father. Left blank. Lam sank onto the road. Han stood before him. That day, I was not asking for a ride for myself. Her voice was so light it almost disappeared into the wind. I was asking for you. Lam pressed the bag to his chest.
I'm sorry.
Han shook her head. You are not at fault. But I lived with him. I called him father. A child calls the person who raises him father. That is not wrong. Lam looked at her. Then why are you still here? Han turned her head toward the road below. Because every night, there are people like him. Lam did not understand. Han continued. People who are tired, people in a hurry, people who think they only need to make it through one more bend, people who think a person standing in the rain has nothing to do with them, People who think that if they leave, the story no longer belongs to them. Wind swept across the pass. From far away, an engine rose through the fog. A passenger bus was climbing the pass. Its lights wavered in the mist. Lamb heard the faint squeal of brakes. Han looked toward the bus. Tonight, you are not the only one who needs the truth.
Lam sai vơ.
What do you mean? Han looked at him. The man driving that bus is falling asleep at the wheel. Lamb spun around. The bus was approaching the bend below. It was not moving very fast, but the road was slick and the fog was too dense. His headlights swayed. Lamb ran into the road, waving his flashlight. Stop! Stop! The bus blasted its horn. It did not slow down. Lamb shouted until his throat burned. Behind him, Han calmly raised one hand. A wall of white fog suddenly rolled down across the road. The bus slammed on its brakes. Tires screamed against wet asphalt. The bus slid sideways. Its front end stopped less than a meter from the edge of the drop-off. The door flew open. The young driver stumbled out, his face drained of blood. What are you doing standing in the road? I almost killed you. Lamb pointed to the front wheel. Look. The driver shone his light down. One front wheel had rolled over the edge. Half the tire was no longer on the asphalt. If the bus had moved another meter, the whole vehicle might have gone over. Inside, passengers began waking up, screaming, crying, calling out to one another. The young driver collapsed to his knees. I closed my eyes for a second. Lamb turned to find Han. She was still there, but her body looked fainter now, as if the fog had begun passing through her. Mom! Han smiled. You stopped. Lamb stepped toward her. Don't go. No one can stand by the road forever, Lamb. I just found you. I found you a long time ago. Han reached for him. This time, her cold fingers touched his cheek. In that moment, Lamb was no longer standing on Haivan Pass. He was a 4-year-old boy sitting in his mother's lap, hearing rain drum on the roof of a vehicle, hearing her sing softly. If you go to Hugh, then go. He felt her arms tighten around him. He saw the lights of a truck rushing toward them. He heard the brakes. He saw the world turn upside down. He saw his mother use her whole body to shield him. And he heard the last thing she said before darkness swallowed everything. Do not be afraid. Mom is here. Lamb opened his eyes. Han was still watching him. Now you know. Lamb held onto her hand. What do I do now? Han looked at the cloth bag in his arms. Take me home. It was almost dawn by the time rescue workers pulled the bus back from the edge. No one died. A few passengers had minor injuries. The young driver sat on the roadside crying like a child. He kept saying that before the bus slid. He had seen a woman in white standing in the middle of the bend, holding a little boy in her arms. No one believed him, except Lamb. As the sun began to rise, the fog slowly lifted from the pass. The sea appeared in the distance, deep blue and silent. Haivan Pass in the morning was beautiful enough to hurt. Lamb sat in the cab with the cloth bag on the passenger seat. This time the seat was not wet. It was not cold. Only the old photograph of his mother and himself rested neatly on top of the bag. He drove down toward Hugh. He did not hurry. He did not turn on the radio. He did not call anyone. He simply drove, as if each bend in the road were returning one missing piece of his life to its proper place. By noon, Lamb found his mother's village using the address on the birth certificate. It was a small village near Tamjong Lagoon. Few people there still remembered Han, but an old neighbor, when she heard the name Nguyen Thi Han, pointed shakily toward the altar in an abandoned house. Han died on the pass. Back then, she carried her child to Da Nang to look for work. Later we heard she died. The little boy disappeared. Poor woman. Lamb placed the cloth bag on the altar. He lit 3 sticks of incense. For the first time in his life, he called the person before him by the right name. Mom. There was no answer. Only incense smoke drifting straight up toward the roof. That afternoon, Lamb called his wife. Thursday answered with fear in her voice. Where are you? I have been calling all night. Lamb looked out across the field. I'm in Hugh. Is something wrong? Lamb was quiet for a moment. I found my mother. The other end of the line went silent. Thursday did not ask anything else. Maybe because she heard his voice. The voice of a man who had just lost part of his life, but had also found another part of it again. 3 days later, Lamb returned to the warehouse in Da Nang. Mr. Sao saw him and said nothing. He only poured a glass of tea and set it down in front of him. Lamb asked, You knew about my father?
Mr. Sao sai.
Part of it. Why didn't you tell me? Some truths, when spoken by an outsider, only become cruelty. The right person has to hear them at the right time. Lamb took his father's letter from his pocket. Mr. Sao looked at it. Min suffered after that night. I am not defending him, but after it happened, he never dared to drive Haivan Pass again. When it rained, he locked the door and sat still. Once, when he was drunk, he said he could hear a woman knocking on the cab door. Lamb gave a bitter laugh. He was afraid my mother would come back for revenge? Mr. Sao shook his head. No. He said she never asked for his life. She only asked, Where is my child? Lamb lowered his head. After a long silence, he asked, Uncle Sao, that delivery the other night, did I really need to go over the pass? Mr. Sao looked at him. No. Lamb raised his eyes. What do you mean? Mr. Sao pulled a delivery slip from the drawer. The customer canceled in the afternoon, but that night the warehouse phone rang. A woman called. She knew your name and your truck's license plate. She said you had to go up the pass that night. If you didn't, a bus would go over the edge. Cold spread along Lamb's spine. You heard her voice?
Mr. Sao nốt đét.
Clearly. Did she give a name? Mr. Sao looked out at the sky. Hang. Lamb said nothing. He stood to leave, but Mr. Sao called after him.
Lam.
Yes. Your truck has a dash cam, doesn't it? Yes. Have you watched it? Lamb shook his head. He had forgotten. That night, at home, Lamb inserted the memory card into his computer. Thursday sat beside him. The video began as the truck climbed the pass.
Veng. Fog.
Dark road. Lamb skipped ahead to the moment he saw the woman. On the screen, the truck passed the place where Han had been standing. But on the shoulder, there was no one. Lam felt goosebumps rise along his arms. The video continued. The truck stopped after the knocking at the back. Lam stepped out to check. The interior camera showed the passenger seat. Empty. Then Lam climbed back in. He looked toward the empty passenger seat and started speaking. But on the screen, the seat remained empty. Thursday covered her mouth. Lam sat frozen. For the entire stretch afterward, he was speaking to empty air. Asking her name. Asking where she was going. Asking how she knew his name. But no one answered. The camera had recorded only Lam's voice, not Han's. Lam skipped ahead to the truck accident, then to the tea stall, then to the moment he opened the metal box. Just as Lam began reading his father's letter, the video distorted. The image jerked. Static ripped through the audio. Thursday reached for the speaker to turn it down, but Lam caught her hand. Inside the static, a woman's voice whispered very softly. This time, the camera captured it. Do not be afraid. Mom is here. Thursday began to cry. Lam could barely breathe. He rewound the clip. Played it again. The same sentence was there. Do not be afraid. Mom is here. But the real final twist was not there. It was in the last 10 seconds of the recording. After the bus had been saved, after people were running back and forth through the fog, the camera faced the windshield. In the white mist, two figures stood by the roadside. A woman in a white raincoat, and a middle-aged man in an old driver's shirt. Lam recognized the man immediately. His father. Min stood a few steps away from Han, head bowed, arms hanging at his sides like a man awaiting judgment. Han did not look at him. She only looked toward the cab where Lam was sitting. Then the camera captured Min's voice. Hoarse. Distant. I gave him back to you. Lam sat completely still. On the screen, Han turned toward Min. Not angry. Not vengeful. Only sad. She answered with one final line. No. You only gave him back to the truth. A moment later, both figures dissolved into the fog. The video ended. Since that day, Lam has never seen the woman asking for a ride on Hivan Pass again. But other drivers still say that on rainy nights, when the fog is thick near Hivan Gate, they sometimes see a woman standing by the road. Only now, she no longer raises her hand to ask for a ride. She only stands there watching each vehicle pass. If a driver slows down, keeps a safe distance, and turns on the lights at the right time, she disappears. But if someone speeds, drifts into the wrong lane, or falls asleep at the wheel, they hear 3 soft knocks on the cab door. And a woman's voice whispers from the empty passenger seat. Stop. Do not let another child lose his mother on this pass. By day, Hivan Pass is still beautiful. It is still the majestic road between mountain and sea. It is still the place where travelers stop to watch clouds drift over Hivan Gate, take photographs, and say they have crossed one of the most stunning coastal passes in Vietnam. But to long-haul drivers, especially those who have driven it through rain at night, Hivan is not only beautiful. It is also a place that keeps the sound of sudden breaking, cries for help swallowed by the wind, and names the living never had time to remember. And sometimes, in the middle of white fog, a spirit still stands beside the road. Not to frighten people, not to drag anyone into the ravine, only to remind the living of one thing. On the most dangerous roads, the scariest thing is not a ghost. It is a driver who thinks he can keep going, even when he is too tired, even when the night is too dark, even when there is only one more bend ahead.
If this story kept you listening until the end, leave a comment with the words Hai Van Pass so I know you made it through the fog. For more true location horror stories from real places across Asia and beyond, subscribe to Infinite Story Realm. And if you ever drive a mountain road in the rain, remember this: some warnings are not meant to scare you, they are meant to save you.